All right, I think I am recording. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it on the cloudy Tuesday afternoon. My name is Haley Kretschmer. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an assistant director of student organizations and activities here at Northwestern. So I am the one who has been sending out those messages via listserv, and I appreciate your response to those messages and making sure that you're here today to join us. I'm also accompanied by Joe Littell, who is an associate director of student organizations and activities here at Northwestern. He has been here for 8+ years. I have been here for 2+ months. So he has been really helpful in getting me onboarded and kind of having the understanding of how to move forward, not only within the realm of advisors, but also all things SOA. So as we go through this meeting, if you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm going to be trying to kind of screen share and manage the chat at the same time, and Joe will be helping do the same. We're really looking forward to speaking to you today more about your role as an advisor and getting you geared up for success here.
Good afternoon, y'all. As Haley mentioned, my name is Joe Littell. I use he, him pronouns. Wishing everyone peace and joy on National Coming Out Day as well today. And thanks to those of you who participated in the advisor questionnaire we sent out. That provides a lot of great information for Haley and I as we hope to really advance the role of student org advisors, whether it is part of your position description at Northwestern, or just a service opportunity you've elected to take on in conjunction with your role with NU. We really appreciate it. So welcome to 2022-23 academic year. It's week 4. Student organizations, in case you aren't aware, are absolutely back to a high level of activity that we haven't seen since before 2019. So we really hope, meaning Haley and I, to engage in more frequent and meaningful communication with the advisor community this year. With the addition of staff in the Student Orgs and Activities Department, we'll have a bit more time and energy to invest towards that, and we really hope to make the most of it. So this particular presentation is informed by some of that questionnaire data we got back from you all, so thank you all so much who participated in it. But this will be the first of many. There will be a mix of both in-person as well as virtual offerings throughout the year. We thought we would get things kicked off with a Zoom just to see what the participant level looks like and the response. And with that, we'll jump into our agenda for today and some of our outcomes.
Obviously, we aren't able to unload every single thing there is to know about being an advisor in this short hour here. But what we're hoping you take away from this meeting today is you'll be able to describe your responsibilities as an advisor. So you'll gain a better understanding of what your role is and how you can support students. You'll be able to navigate to resources at the university to help organizations you advise. And you'll be able to access resources to develop advising skills that center student learning. So we're going to be going through a lot of different resources that we have here at Northwestern to make sure that you're set up for success. So on today's agenda, we first are going to be sharing a lot more about student orgs and activities role and different ways students learn about resources, policies, and maintain their registered student organization status with Northwestern. So we'll talk about what they basically do on the front end to make sure that they are okay to be registered here at NU. We're going to offer an overview of student organization finances, as well as fundraising tools available to all registered student organizations. This is something that a lot of you asked for in that feedback form that you gave us. So definitely going to make sure to cover that. We'll offer a summary of where organizations tend to be at this time of year with personnel and how to keep the momentum going this fall to make sure that they are still actively engaged with what their mission is and continuing to recruit members. And of course, we'll have time at the end for any questions that you have that we can hopefully answer for you.
Terrific. So as we get started, if folks would like, go ahead and share who you are, where you work at the university, and the names of any orgs that you currently advise. We may have some folks here who are just here to learn and might be prospective advisors, and that's totally fine too. So we're going to kick things off because one of the items we learned from the questionnaire is especially new advisors reach out and try and get an understanding of what their role is in the whole student org landscape. So we're going to start off by sharing a bit about the student org community as a whole. There are around 400 undergraduate registered student organizations. Most of them are registered through SOA. There are some who are sponsored by a department and then still student-led. All of these organizations are expected to complete the two items that you see on the left side. Re-register the organization on Wildcat Connection and complete SUCs, and I'll explain a little bit about both those items. So just like many other universities, Northwestern registered student orgs are expected to complete some annual requirements in order to maintain their benefits with Northwestern. Wildcat Connection, for those of you who don't know, is an online platform where all of our registered student organizations have a listing. We expect the students to manage their own page, and then we're available to help with that as needed. We also often drop in tips on how to optimize their presence on the platform. Anytime prospective students that might be on a campus tour, they might be getting started with Before the Arch as they're admitted and enrolled at Northwestern. Whenever the question comes up of how do I just find a list of all the groups or clubs or student orgs at Northwestern, the answer is always Wildcat Connection. And so it's really important for your organization to have updated contact information, links that work on the page, and to really fill it with content to give it its best appearance it can. But know that that is not the advisor's responsibility. We expect the students to take care of that. But if you haven't even seen your organization's Wildcat Connection page, it's definitely worth taking a look. So we expect the group to re-register on Wildcat Connection. It's just a series of screens that they advance through. It's mostly confirming contact information for the organization so that the university has that updated as folks graduate and move on. And that does include accounting for the advisor's contact information. All registered student orgs are expected to have a constitution as well. And there's a constitution writing guide on the SOA website for new organizations, since drafting an original constitution might sound pretty daunting. We have a guide and some recommendations that can assist with that. And then also just any other information that needs to be updated on the Wildcat Connection page, that's the time to do so on an annual basis. The last part of the re-registration step is providing up to 5 student net IDs to complete what we call SUCs. So those of you on the call might be familiar with MOOCs. At Northwestern for student orgs, we have SUCs. We call them Student Org Officer Canvas courses. And so student groups tell us who in your org is going to be most responsible for event planning, who's going to be most responsible for fundraising and budgeting, likely a SOFO officer, right? And then these other topics that you see on the screen. So that is our opportunity to train representatives in student organizations to get them off the ground so they all have a baseline knowledge of things like how to reserve a room on campus, the rules around fundraising, the rules around advertising, but it isn't just policies. We also support them with resources, right? For a long, long time, resources were just kind of passed down in the community by word of mouth. This is a way to ensure even a brand new group that's just getting started has the same information as an organization that seems tapped into everything around them. Once the re-registration of the organization on Wildcat Connection is reviewed and complete, and those SUCs have been completed by up to 5 different reps of the student organization, they are then registered for the following academic year, which we mirror the fiscal year with that, September to August, and they can request a table for the fall work fair. Because it's often a challenge to give someone information in April, May, or June that they won't need until October or November, we have ongoing communication throughout the year. SOA gets an email out every Friday morning into the president, treasurer, and primary contacts inboxes. for every Wildcat Connection page. That's approximately 1,100 inboxes in our community. We also host in-person and virtual workshops, a lot like we're on right now for the advisors. Haley and I and Marcella from SOA just co-hosted one last week, all about how to keep the momentum going after the org fair. And we'll share a little bit about that with this community as well. We also offer an annual resource fair event. We try and hit that sweet spot of when most organizations have already transitioned their leadership. So they have new folks with new responsibilities, they're a sponge, they're learning a lot. And again, we want to connect them with resources on and off campus. We also use the announcements feature in Canvas if there's any update to a resource or a policy or a reminder about something. And of course, we're on Insta. We're north of 3,000 followers now, getting close to that blue check mark, I'm pretty sure. We invite advisors to follow us as well, SOA NU, and then on Facebook, Student Orgs NU. And Insta is just a terrific resource for us, not only to reach the student org officer population, but we follow pretty much every RSO account that's out there, registered student org account. And so we're always promoting just what's going on in our campus community to the general student body for involvement and event opportunities. Okay, so relevant for the advisors. Know that in terms of what we expect of this community, all advisors have an advisor acknowledgement form that the students should have provided to you to be registered for this year. That form really outlines the A to Z of expectations from SOA, but the remainder of this visual will also cover that. So we expect you as an advisor to connect with a rep from your org at least once a quarter or more as the org needs. I currently advise Dance Marathon. I connect with them several times a week because they plan one of the larger budget student run events on campus. I also advise a club that gets together to play bridge at Norris every week. I don't need to meet with them every week to learn what happened in the bridge game. So I connect with them about once a quarter, and you'll be able to feel that out with your organization. We do expect the advisor to be familiar with the student org constitution. Just recently, we had an advisor connect with us. There's some interpersonal issues in a student org they're advising. The constitution is a really helpful tool in assisting with how to navigate, differences of opinion, any sort of conflict in the org. It doesn't necessarily account for every situation, of course, but at the very least, it's an important item for an org not to lose sight of. In addition to that, we'll talk a bit about finances later, but of course at Northwestern, student organizations have their advisors sign off on expenses. We'll share a little more about that, as well as collect travel-related documents. Haley and I are planning to either present a similar workshop to this focused on student org travel, or at least create some more resources online in addition to what's on the website to answer travel questions. And then beyond that, serve as a resource to enhance the org's efforts to build community, right? So be aware of any upcoming events that are going to require contracts. Students are expected to CC their advisor at the very least, if not have a conversation with them as they're submitting documents for the university to review and sign. And we'll likely be hosting a session totally devoted to the contract process and what the advisor's role is in that process later on this fall or winter. But we do have information on our website about that topic currently.
So just a few friendly reminders that we have for you. The first seems fairly obvious, but it has happened where we found that unenrolled students are somehow participating in our org. So I want to make sure that you understand that only enrolled students are permitted to serve as an officer or as a general body member of a registered student organization. That is for liability reasons, among many other things. For folks who have been here advising for many moons, there is no longer a registered student organization cover sheet for student organization contracts. So students are still expected to keep you in the loop via email by CCing you with any correspondence when submitting contracts for Northwestern to review and sign. Again, we'll touch upon this later, but when student organizations have contracts come through, that is always through student organizations and activities, our specific process. So students should never be signing any type of contract on their own without having it come through us first. And lastly, SOFO, the Student Org's financial office, is fully in person with ink and paper signatures, meaning if an organization needs to withdraw money for a certain reason or pay any sort of debt that they own, physical signatures are required, and there are voucher booklets that each student organization will have access to that they would be bringing to you then to put your signature on there to go forward with whatever process it is. But just making it clear to you all that as of right now, that process is still 100% in person. There are a few dates to keep in mind, not only for you to pass along to your organization members, but also to make sure that you are hopefully, or they are not planning over programming that already exists that are more popular here at Northwestern. So we have already had our fall organization fair a couple weeks ago. It was a really huge success. And now our next one will be the winter org fair. It will be one day only, and it will be on January 4th at Norris Center. Same thing for the spring org fair. It's going to be a one-day event, and that will occur on April 3rd. So be sure to mark those two down. We find that the fall org fair has a greater amount of orgs who participate and want to actually recruit, but pop those dates into the ears of your leadership of your org, because who knows, they may want to table at those events as well. We also have the resource fair that will be in the early spring, but we don't have a date quite set for that. Re-registration for 2023-2024 academic year opens in early spring with an initial deadline of midsummer. This is something that, of course, I will be pushing out to the listserv to you all to remind folks, but we do find that orgs are really pushing it up to the last second to re-register, and this is important in making sure that they still have access to everything that they would as a registered student organization this year. So more to come on that. Make sure that you want to be informing your students of that. And lastly, both Dance Marathon and Dillo Day are two huge events that happen at Northwestern. Dance Marathon will take place over March 3rd through 5th, the evening of March 3rd into the morning of March 5th, dancing the whole time. And Dillo Day happens on Saturday, May 20th of this year. So you'll want to make sure that folks aren't programming over those dates.
I was going to add, those dates aren't, by and large, they are not what I would call blackout dates, but we do want your orgs to be aware that those events are happening. We saw a successful event happen in Norris on Dillo Day in 2022. But if organizations identify that as a date to put, all of their budget into a signature event, they should absolutely know that a lot of their peers will be participating in some of these other things.
Thanks, Joe. In terms of recruitment and member engagement, Joe earlier alluded to a session that we put together last week for students to think thoughtfully through how they can really continue the recruitment process and make sure that once members sign up, they actually have a purpose in the organization. A suggestion that we passed along to students, and we want to pass along to you as well, is setting expectations is really important for the organization members so they can better understand their roles, and they can understand expectations that you have of them and vice versa. So again, being in touch with the leadership of that org is going to be your best strategy for finding out their different channels of communication and what works best, and also to help you learn more about the membership structure. Some organizations have had the same membership structure for the past 10 or 15 years, and that's really what they go with. You may be advising an organization that just kickstarted last year and they're still trying to figure out what works best. So having that conversation will make it easy for you to understand what's going on, and hopefully easier for them when it comes time to reach out to you for help. Utilizing resources like the listservs, which any organization can get their own listserv by contacting Northwestern IT, by, of course, pushing out any type of event on social media, and of course, utilizing Wildcat Connection, that database that Joe was talking about earlier, where you can learn about any organization we have here on campus. Recruitment does not have to stop now that the fall org fair is over, right? We have org fairs coming up in the winter and the spring quarters, but for many barrier-free organizations, they're constantly wanting to get more folks throughout the school year. So it's something that you can pass along to the leaders as well. Something that we really talked about in terms of keeping members engaged was surprising and celebrating org members. I think to pass along to them, one strategy that they can certainly use is at the start of every meeting that they have, going around and giving a piece of gratitude, or sharing a really cool moment that they saw someone else did in the organization, just to have folks know that their work matters and is seen. And also for you to do the same, even for those org members, especially for those of you who do have more constant communication throughout each quarter, depending upon what your org looks like. In summary, we really want to encourage student leaders to identify and delegate tasks. That's a great way to keep members engaged, by making sure that everyone has something to do versus the general body just kind of showing up to weekly meetings and the executive board doing everything. It doesn't have to be that way. And we're trying to encourage that culture of bringing everyone in and giving everyone something to do, to make them feel as though they are, actively part of the organization. Asking student leaders to regularly solicit feedback from their members. If something's not working, why? If someone is upset, why? If the general body is not happy, then people aren't going to want to be showing up to those weekly meetings or to the events that you put on. So by soliciting feedback, again, that's a way that members can know that their participation actually matters. Tracking participation is another huge one. It'll be pretty obvious what members decide to come every week versus folks who maybe come once a quarter or twice a quarter. Have the executive board think about that for the general body members, because who knows, the people who are more active may eventually want to become on the executive board. And even for you to note for yourself, who are the people on the executive board who answer me most often, who are making sure that I'm in the loop with things. That's going to be really important for you as an advisor. And that goes along with keeping members in the loop, making sure that they are keeping you in the loop. The more communication that there is across channels, the easier it is for you all to move forward and make sure you're on the same page.
All right, thanks so much, Haley. We're going to switch topics and give, first off, an overview of really how the funding works at Northwestern for the student org community, what the advisor's role is in that process, and then I'll offer some pro tips regarding funding. So I see my white boxes could not quite cover the percentages that actually don't mean anything when I was attempting to use a graphic for this, but I did want to give you a sense of where a lot of the money comes from for our student orgs. So I'll talk about SOFO in a moment, but we see a lot of students that want to begin their own registered student org. And we have a recorded video all about what comes with that, what they can expect, what the responsibilities are. And I think the assumption that often gets reversed is, oh, we suddenly don't get money just because we're a registered student org. So we know the majority of student orgs seek a piece of that ASG allocation. All the students that pay a student activity fee as part of their tuitions and fees gets pooled, and ASG is the steward of that money. It's between $1 and $2 million total. And so most of that money is already accounted for each year, because orgs that tend to get money last year are going to get about the same amount with a slight increase this year. So there really isn't that much to be captured by groups that are not already supported by ASG finances, though they do invite organizations to apply to be part of the allocation pool each year. They are required to be registered as an RSO for at least 1 year before attempting to seek a piece of the ASG allocations. But no worries, because there's lots of other opportunities for your group to seek funding. Just a little bit more about ASG. They reformed how they review and make decisions on funding with different levels they call tiers. So there's student organizations that can, and it's all event-based, I should add. So if your organization that you advise wants to put on an event and their budget proposal seeks around $500 from student government, that's in one tier. It gets grouped with a bunch of other proposals that are in that same level of budget. If your organization seeks to put on a much larger budget event, north of $10,000, then that's in the same pool as organizations who have budget proposals at that level. So there are organizations that put on events at multiple tiers. There's organizations that also get funding from multiple sources. But know that ASG funding decisions tend to be independent of whether the organization gets funding from anywhere else. So it's not like an either or when it comes to funding, but know that ASG is pretty restrictive in terms of what the expenses can be used for, because the ask tends to be so much greater than the budget that they have for events. But by and large, other than food or catering, most expenses for student organizations that ASG will fund are related to an event that the group is putting on for the student body. So it's not to purchase, apparel for group members. It's not to purchase, maybe like a training or a conference registration that really only benefits the group members. It tends to be for putting on events hosted on campus throughout the year that anyone can participate in. For any money that does not get used after the request has been approved, ASG has a process they call rollbacks. As of now, the group isn't expected to really do anything. ASG just looks at a balance that remains at the end of the academic year and then says, okay, you requested, $500, use 440. We're going to take the $60 back and roll it back into the pool and use it for future requests. Know that of the around 400 registered student orgs, only about 150 RSOs receive part of that ASG allocation pool. So the other funds or other revenues tend to be department budgets. So I know like our vehicle building teams are supported by McCormick School of Engineering. Some of our Medill groups are sponsored by Medill, et cetera. There's also a number of grants, which I will absolutely feature in this session because I think they're the most under-tapped and underappreciated source of revenue for this community. And then there are some groups that get revenue from their own fundraising, gifts to the university, but that is not the most common route that students are going. So in terms of, well, what happens with the money? Northwestern has a student organization finance office, also known as SOFO. The windows are located on the first floor of the Norris Center, and they do a lot. So they are the authority regarding how student orgs receive funds, and SOFO also trains student org officers for the rules and procedures that SOFO has for accessing those funds. Advisors are not expected to complete a full SOFO training. And so this kind of comes to one of the items we saw a few times in the questionnaire results, which is, I'm a new advisor. I emailed people to tell them I'm an advisor. And now students are bringing me this little booklet and then printed out receipts, and I just don't really know what I'm supposed to do. So I just sign them. That's fine. You're doing great. Advisors are expected as kind of a check for the university accounting procedure to sign off on all receipts as well as vouchers. And vouchers are the kind of 2-ply sheet in the book that functions as an attachment when a student treasurer or president submits for an expense at the SOFO window. So all expenses are going to get signed by the advisor. It's done in ink, it's on paper. Students, will print out emails if they have like a rideshare receipt or anything that gets receipted electronically, and the advisor signs that in vouchers. For advisors of orgs with like a higher volume of expenses, if you're not already, I always encourage them just to block out 15 to 30 minutes a week with a recurring appointment, because it's really common for students to feel like they're chasing around their counterpart for a signature. If it's an ASG expense, they have to chase down someone from student government and then your advisor. So just from a time management piece, it can be really helpful to identify a time where you expect a rep from the org you advise to pop in, be prepared with things for you to sign, for you to review, and then they can go on to collect the next signature or go to the window in Norris. Know that if an advisor signs something they shouldn't, for example, a receipt or a voucher that has Illinois sales tax included, SOFO will not reimburse for sales tax. There's really no punishment for the advisor in doing that, but know that SOFO does have a number of policies and procedures, and we expect the advisor, if anything ever seems a little off with a receipt or an expense, it's always acceptable to just ask a couple follow-up questions for whoever's giving you something to sign, right? So SOFO, this is another misconception. Some groups think, oh, I get money from SOFO. Well, SOFO just holds on to the assets. They're the bank. So they're in compliance with Northwestern Budget Office. And within a student organization's SOFO account, there can be multiple lines. Lines can represent different streams of revenue, and they can also represent different rules of how those lines can be spent. So for example, any money that comes from an ASG allocation to your student organization, when an expense attempts to draw from that line, there must also be an ASG finance executive that signs that voucher as well. It doesn't really affect the advisor too much, but we know if an advisor asks, okay, how much money do you have? They're going to see basically like an umbrella or a tree of different account lines. And just know that, you know, the org has access to all the money in all those lines. There just might be some different rules that go with it. Orgs, we also expect them to avoid any negative balances in lines. This can get really tricky, especially because some of the services groups pay for bill well after the service is rendered. So whether it's Northwestern catering, whether it's a banner that they've printed at the source, we encourage groups to maintain their own internal spreadsheet or other account file to account for expenses that they know are coming, but haven't actually been reflected in SOFO transaction history. So SOFO emails a transaction history as well as the balance of each of the SOFO account lines to the student org officers. Advisors can also request this by emailing sofo@northwestern.edu or visiting the window in person. An attendant at the window will gladly assist by printing out a recent transaction history for the account. I've encountered firsthand orgs that their treasurer might not have had a full onboarding or training. And so even they don't have a full understanding of why their group has money in all these different lines. I once advised a group that was pulling all of their expenses from what was called a general line. And what was happening is they were getting money specifically allocated for like a fall show, and then another one specifically for a member bonding event. But they just kept expensing it from the general line. And what happened is then some other budget needs came up and they didn't have any money in that general line left. And now the money they should have spent from those event specific lines was still there, but they couldn't use it for their needs. So it's something to look at as you're signing vouchers or receipts. The line tends to be a 2-digit ID at the very end of the account. And so identifying that can be really helpful to make sure the group is optimizing all the funds that they have. And this, it's just fiscal responsibility. If your organization has maybe a website where they're paying a domain fee, or if they have offsite storage, or anything else that's just kind of like a long-term recurring fee or subscription, make sure the orgs have an actual plan in place to pay for it. Student government allocations are often budgeted into a line for things like storage or technology. Groups can always pay for from a general line for these items as well, but it always makes me a little nervous when I start doing the math of how many months are left on this, how much money do you have? You seem uncertain that there's more coming, so what's the plan here? just something to keep an eye out if you start getting receipts and vouchers to sign off for that are kind of like a monthly bill. So that's a bit about budgeting. Kind of within the money topic, though, is fundraising. And so Northwestern has some rules regarding how student organizations can fundraise. And we always encourage them first to go to the SOA website. Under the org officer section, there's a whole page with funding opportunities. Most of these opportunities are from other offices or student government, and we're just the messenger on them. There are a couple SOA grants, but we encourage students within a group to explore all the grants that are available to them. I'll share with this audience that last year ASG allocated a lot of money for community building grants, which a lot of groups are looking for. They want a little bit of money to maybe have a meal out or have kind of like a fun afternoon, but they also want some support to do that and not expect everyone to foot the bill themselves. ASG can support around 50 community building grants, and they only had 6 applications last year. And I know that there are groups that were using other SOFO money and not applying for this grant to kind of fund that expense. So always encourage your groups as they kind of outline their plans for the year. If they identify any funding shortages, or if they say our members are having to chip in on some things, we never really want that in our community, especially when there's money to be granted out. Know that some groups who are thinking really big and going above and beyond what they typically do year to year, there's a program run through Alumni Relations and Development called Catalyzer. You see a screenshot of Katsu Compost on the side of the screen there. This is a long-term strategy, right? So for the org that says, we're putting on this event in a week, we're short money, we need it, Catalyzer is not going to be the solution. They're going to need to identify what they need to cut from that budget, most likely. But Catalyzer is, like a capital expense, or maybe a club sports team that tends to travel, needs to upgrade their equipment, or maybe they want to host a competition for the first time at NU, but there's added expenses for that. So Catalyzer Northwestern is the search term for that. Proposals get reviewed every quarter and get hosted on the Northwestern website and promoted to the Alumni Association, as well as the student org community. There's also the occasional Evanston or Chicagoland paid volunteer opportunity. I know there's a Hot Cocoa 10K coming up where they're looking for a lot of volunteers that they'll pay in exchange for their service. Events at Ryan Field, occasionally Welsh Ryan Arena will have opportunities for student organizations to staff concessions in exchange for some cash. Know that of the kind of fundraising opportunities, items like Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Indiegogo, we're all familiar with them as a way to, promote a Little League team or whatever the circumstances are. Those are prohibited at NU. It has to do with just the nature of NU as a not-for-profit organization and how those funds move. I also encourage advisors to connect with students. It's happened a few times now where students get excited about an opportunity. They're approached by some sort of third party. The initial communication is, hey, this sounds great. It seems like we don't really have to do anything in exchange in order to maybe get a little extra cash for our organization or build our presence. And then lo and behold, a couple communications later, the organization wants the group to agree to something that they might not be comfortable with as like a promotional opportunity. So advisors can always be the first set of eyes on these things as the older adult that might have dealt with a situation like this in the past. And you can always reach out to SOA if something feels a little too good to be true, or maybe just a little dicey. We can also assist with communication to the students on that topic too.
Our hope is that our website is kind of your one-stop shop where we outline not only resources for advisors, you all get your own tab, but also for student org leaders. So we have a lot of what we covered in this slideshow kind of embedded in our website. We also have tools related to if someone wants to start up another organization, more about fundraising, things about travel, that type of that type of subject. So I strongly encourage you to please surf our page to learn more about what's out there and how we can best support you. But of course, when you have questions that you can't find the answer to on our site, Joe and I are your best bet as that next step. For situations where your organization is engaging in illegal activity or there is harassment going on between members, something like that, that's very much above our office. That heads to the Office of Community Standards, the Office of Equity. Those are two amazing resources. So if you find yourself in a situation where you are learning of something going on in your organization and you're not quite sure what to do, of course, you can loop Joe and myself in, but also going straight to the Office of Community Standards or the Office of Equity might be your next best bet. Hopefully that will not happen throughout this academic year for you, but we like to put that out there just for you to be aware. We also would like to plug the Wildcat Impact Award because it does affect student organizations and advisors. So I actually want to read this slide verbatim since we have a lot of words on here just to make sure we're all on the same page. The Wildcat Impact Awards are a quarterly platform to recognize students, both undergraduate and graduate, who have demonstrated one or more of Northwestern's community values as defined in the Northwestern Student Handbook and contributed to creating a more engaged and inclusive campus community. Each quarter, the committee's selections have their photo and accomplishments displayed on a banner in the Northwestern University Center, along with an invitation to attend the end-of-year Wildcat Excellence Awards. We invite you to submit a nomination form and to encourage students, faculty, staff, and community members to do so as well as a means of highlighting our students, their student orgs, and advisors. So in a listserv memo that I will send out after this presentation is over in the next 24 hours, I will include this link to the nomination form. Again, this is a quarterly award that is given out to students. So if you feel like you have students who are going above and beyond and really aligning themselves with the community values here at NU, I encourage you to submit a nomination on behalf of those students. And my colleague Daniela Fiju, she is the Assistant Director of Leadership Development and Community Engagement, is really heading the charge here in terms of overseeing the Wildcat Impact Awards and the Wildcat Excellence Awards that happen at the end of the year. So with any questions that you may have about this award, contacting Daniela is a great place to start. We recognize that we just threw a lot of information at you. Again, we don't expect that now you are leaving this presentation knowing every single thing that there is to know about being an advisor. But my hope is that this was a starting place for you and kind of exploring what is out there for you, the resources that we have for you, and the ways that Joe and I can assist you. So before we hop into questions, I am just going to stop the recording here. And for those of you who are watching, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. So